Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not to Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of The Walking Dead. A great season premiere. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, I really like how the episode starts off just kind of like, okay, obviously we're going through a little bit of time skip. You know, it's a new situation. Everyone's kind of working towards the same goal. It's kind of interesting, and I'll kind of skip around, but well, no, I'll kind of finish out my thought. Obviously, you see everyone kind of working together. Everything seems good. But then quickly, and I think aesthetically, it's a very good approach because I was like, oh man, things are kind of looking good. Like, there's a little chit chat between certain characters and just kind of seeing where everyone kind of is and standing and just, catching up with some of the characters. And it's just kind of like, okay, we're working towards this goal. They go to that museum type of thing. Jadis Anne had suggested like, oh yeah, here's some seeds that she knew about it because of like, oh yeah, this is back when I was teaching and stuff like that, which is interesting to learn that tidbit for information. Did it come up at all last season? I don't think it did. So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. But just little things here and there. Like that whole Gabriel conversation he had with Anne, of just kind of like oh yeah, look at this, the de-evolution of humans and stuff like that. And they're just kind of cracking jokes just because the walker that Gabriel ended up killing just happened to lean up and be stuck to the thing, and it just kind of fit like the evolution, and it was just kind of interesting. And they made like a little joke about it like that. I thought that was kind of interesting. But they're getting out supplies. Things kind of went bad a little bit with Ezekiel, but then it was kind of like no, things are good. And then there's the whole situation with Ken, things ending the way they did there. And that, I think, was a good turn, because I was like, okay, everyone's still alive. Everything seems like it's okay. Because I was like, because that glass could have cracked sooner, but it didn't. So I was kind of like worried about all of that front. Interestingly enough, we learn about Carol and Ezekiel being a thing. Even the fact is he proposed to her, she's like, put that thing away. Get caught on something. And the fact of the matter is, like, I forgot 100% her reasonings. It was like, oh yeah, one of them was like, it's definitely not going to happen on horseback. But also, no, also the reason was because it's like, I told you not to propose after like situations like this, like where it's like, oh, a little scary, like, oh, like mortality moments are like, oh, make you realize what you got, take advantage of those and hold those you love dear while you still have the chance, that type of thing. And she was like, I don't want those type of situations to be the reason why you propose. And she even admits it later on that there's part of her that kind of wishes to say yes, but she wants to kind of take things slow at her own pace. Because even she's not 100% sure why she said no. But nevertheless, Ken's death was just the trigger needed to set a lot of things in motion. Because it's like, oh yeah, everything seems like it's okay to a certain degree. You see some stuff here and there, but then it's like, no. And then the rest of the episode is like, yeah, things are not working on every front. What's kind of interesting? The only place I feel like we didn't get a good look at was Oceanside or the Alexandria. We got a good look at Hilltop and the Sanctuary, because there's like division amongst everything, because like a lot of people have a problem with the way Maggie's running things. Apparently there was an election, Gregory ran it and everything, he lost, but he was being super nice about it and everything. And even Maggie was like, yeah, that's weird. And even Michonne's joking. No, I think it was it Michonne or Carol who jokes about the fact is the rebirth of democracy, and it was by Gregory's hand. It's like, who would have ever thought that? It's like, I was like, really? Gregory's not being a dick? That's a surprise. And then it's like, oh, then there's the whole situation of Maggie having to deal with the fact is that Ken died because she's the one that brought him out there. And it turns into this whole thing of like I said, it's a division of like, because even though they're trying to work towards this same goal, things aren't firing on all cylinders. Things over at the Sanctuary aren't really good. They can't really grow crops. And that's something, because Daryl's the one that's kind of been running things. It's kind of like, that's why Negan got like supplies and food from other places, because this place is a factory, can't really grow anything here. But, Rick is trying to. And then they're also borrowing a lot of food and supplies from the Hilltops, because like before, they're the ones that mainly supply and a lot of stuff, and they're having to give a lot over, which is causing a lot of problems in the Hilltop, because a lot of people, in particular, Ken's family, his mom was kind of like, yeah, I voted for you, Maggie, but it doesn't mean we're friends. The fact of the matter is, it's kind of like, she has a problem with the Sanctuary too, because like those people kill, so many people. They killed your husband, and yet you're just kind of letting things be, because it's just kind of like, because for a lot of people it's like you're letting Rick kind of dictate a lot of stuff. This is supposed to be your community, we voted you in and everything, but you're not representing us to the right extent. Even but going back to Gregory being the sneaky snake that he is, like the moment he started offering people drinks and they're like, oh, let's talk and stuff, I'm like, okay, what you got up your sleeve? Literally convincing Ken's dad to try and kill Maggie, because he's saying like, oh, she's doing terrible things for the community. Like, because even Ken's mom was like, even though Gregory is a slime ball snake that he is, at the very least he is right about putting the community first, which you kind of aren't, is what her argument was against Maggie. And his argument just being like, Gregory being who he is, kind of, I think even he's a dick about it, but he points out some truths and stuff like that. But he manipulates the situations, because he was talking like, I didn't know things were going to go down the way they did. Like when he was like, oh yeah, someone defaced Glenn's grave, I thought it was going to be like, oh, she goes over there, and it did happen. And I thought it was supposed to create animosity between Maggie and the group. It's like, no, he just sent her over there to get attacked by Ken's dad, which it doesn't go down the way he thinks it does. And she confronts him. It's like, look at you. You up here claiming that you can run this place, but you're too chicken shit to actually even kill me. You can't even murder someone properly, and you're trying to run this place. It's like, I built this place, blah, 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 blah. You're just kind of following Rick's like commands and stuff like that. She could have killed him right then and there, but she didn't, because he, it could be flipped to be like, oh, like she hurt me out of, it could be spun negatively for her. So like I said, Daryl doesn't want to be around the sanctuary because too many bad memories. Things are kind of spiraling there too, because it's like, for one, you had the people being like, oh, look, it's Rick. That's Rick Grimes. He's the one that ended the war. That was kind of interesting. So he's a little famous, which is interesting too, because the fact is that they say that means that a lot of those people haven't seen Rick before. I mean, which is interesting considering the fact is like, because a lot of people on the inside weren't the fighters. They were the workers on the inside and stuff like that. So unless you were on the outside fighting, of course you would have never met Rick. But also that says like in whatever amount of time is skipped by, which enough has for Maggie to have had her and Glenn's baby Herschel, that Rick hasn't been there in that entire time. But I guess that's kind of the point too, just because like there's so much work going around. So maybe just because other people are in charge of certain areas, so it's kind of like we don't really need to like be there all the time. But so it was just kind of interesting to me. He's kind of like this folk hero in a certain regard. But turns out there's some people leaving messages being like, oh, Savior, save us. We are still Negan. So he still has some pull there, that there are some people who still, because things aren't working great there, like even under Rick, it's like those people, things are potentially being worse, because at least with Negan, they never starved. Now, like crops are kind of failing. They're not getting the food they need and want, so there's that issue. Because it's kind of interesting too, because with the whole Hilltop situation, like Maggie and Rick had their conversation, because Michelle suggests the whole like, oh yeah, let's kind of make it so like we treat each other right. We're not at like, we make some kind of like, a charter to kind of be like, keep the peace between the groups and stuff like that. But yeah, it was kind of interesting seeing Maggie do like a 180 after everything, like the attempt on her life, both by Ken's dad as well as Gregory, which is interesting. Like I wasn't expecting Gregory to do what he actually did. I remember the whole thing, like wasn't that last season he couldn't even do the whole like not like trying to kill a Walker situation, like he kind of sucked in that regard too. I mean, to be fair, Maggie has given him chance after chance. Gregory has done nothing but be a piece of crap over and over and over again, and this is just the final straw. And I think it's hard to say, like, in a situation who's right and who's really wrong, because there's, like, you can understand where everyone stands, because Maggie is trying to look after the best for her community. It's also interesting because, like, he was a dick about it, Gregory, because he was like, oh, yeah, like, the real reason why you won't go back to Alexandria, because you know who is there. And it's even something, like, even Michonne and Rick struggle with, like, maybe we should have killed Negan, but it's like, for him, it's like, it wouldn't have made much of a difference about today's circumstances. Like, things still would have played out. It's like, it's hard to say, I think on some level, maybe Maggie Daryl and everyone was trying to still give Rick a chance because we saw them kind of conspiring at the end of season 8, but we don't know what their ultimate, like what they really planned on doing because they're like, what Rick's doing is the wrong move. So I don't know, maybe this entire time they're secretly sabotaging things. I doubt it. Like, I think they are legitimately trying to give this a chance, but it's falling apart. And so probably before things completely fall apart, they'll probably step in because even Maggie's like, Rick, you told me to like, that you eventually you'd follow me, but the time is coming, you haven't. So she's like, that's going to change. She's talking about the fact is that like we're supposed to be giving more to the sanctuary, but we're not going to. The fact of the matter is they want to help build a bridge. That's fine. My people want to help. That's fine. But the sanctuary is going to supply most of the labor, and they're going to give us some of the fuel and stuff that they're making. They're what they're doing to make gas and stuff like that. Like they're going to give a good chunk of that, but it's like the sanctuary doesn't have much to give. They're struggling. And for Maggie, it's like, I don't care. Yes, they have their problems. Boo-hoo for them, but we do too. So it's kind of like, I think for her, her empathy's kind of run dry because it's like your way of running things isn't, but that's the thing. Like, it's hard to say like who's 100% right. Maybe they're right in their regard, and maybe Rick's going about this the wrong way. But Rick is trying his best. It's like because for her, she has no sympathy for him because like, oh, who gives a shit about the sanctuary? They surrendered. They should be grateful we let them live. Is basically her point. And then the whole like executing Gregory, and he's been like, oh, you have shame because you're killing me at night. And she's like, I have no shame. Like, that's why we're doing, like, if it was shame, I'd probably like, wait, the fact is I'm doing this right now. It means that very point that I'm steadfast in my decision. Some kids walked out and Michonne tried to stop her, but I think, and Rick stopped her in particular. I think it's because Rick knew where Maggie stood right now. And it's like, no, this is her place. We have no right to tell her like to halt or do whatever. We can't tell her anything. I think that's why Rick stopped her. And it's like she handled it herself by being like, get the kids back in bed. Like, but the fact is that she was so going ahead with like, no, go ahead and kill him. I guess it meant like she was so focused on that she didn't even notice the kids were there. Or the fact of the matter is she doesn't really care because it's like, yeah, they need to know how things stand too. It's like, I don't want to do this again, but you need to learn the crime fits the punishment. And so do not make me do this again because I don't want to. So I think it's going to make this in itself is going to make Michonne and Rick definitely probably look at Maggie in a different light, which is interesting considering the fact, it's like I said, like they had that whole jokey conversation, but then to be fair, we don't really know what's happened in that time skip. Like the characters have kind of probably potentially have gotten a lot distant, but it's probably been such a subtle thing that no one's really noticed. Kind of, I mean, and like going back to it, it's something Daryl had brought up. The fact of the matter is he doesn't like the way things are now because it's like, where we were before, and even when a smaller group, we got stuff done. We could do anything. But now it's like that group, it's spread out because look, like Rick and Michonne are at Alexandria, Daryl's at the sanctuary, Maggie's at the hilltop, and then Carol's at the kingdom. So that's just using a few examples. But like even all the people that came together in Alexandria are like split up, they're not even just talking about the long time original group. Well, not original group, but partially original group. Even amongst them, they're heavily divided, and then there's even divisions amongst that. So it's kind of like you see where Daryl's coming from too, because it's just like we spread ourselves so thin, and we're trying to fight for something that isn't worth fighting for. But Rick is like, things have changed, and Daryl's kind of like, yeah, they changed because you changed them. So it's like, obviously, like I said, he doesn't agree with the way things were run. Maggie doesn't either. Like, it seems like, because obviously, like, it was them plus Jesus they were the ones that were kind of the most content with the way Rick is handling things, which I thought was kind of interesting coming from Jesus, because the way he approached everything, I guess for him, it was just kind of like, no, like, hey, handle things the way we handled it, but he needed Negan to die. Like, I think amongst anyone else, like the fact is leaving Negan alive, I think in Jesus's book was kind of like, no, that's the ultimate like screw up there. It's like, I kind of follow everything else you do, but not the whole leaving Negan alive after everything he's done, so I don't know, man. Because even the kingdom, like they talk about it a little bit. We don't get a lot of look into it, but the kingdom is kind of in rough shape too, because most of its fighters died last season. So they're kind of in that situation trying to build back up their army. So there's also this interesting conversation. Isn't it Cassie from Oceanshot side, her and Daryl had that conversation where she's like, she looked at the canoe and it made her think of her brother, and she was asking the same thing for Daryl, and Daryl's like, yeah, most of the time when he thinks about him and his brother, it was usually like, fights and stuff like that. But he has some friends that he fought alongside of, but sadly they're not near anymore. So he's like, yeah, I understand. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting conversation in itself. Like I said, I think just aesthetically, it was kind of an interesting thing of making it seem like, oh yeah, things are gelling. They're collecting supplies and stuff like that. It's actually interesting too because, like, in the grand scheme of things, those supplies they were getting were all being sent to the sanctuary, which is what kind of pissed like Ken's parents off more, because it's like, if it was for our community, okay, that's one thing. It still would have sucked because like Ken was meant to just take care of animals. He wasn't supposed to be out in the field. So it's like, that's why they blame Maggie. His mom was like, yeah, you're not even invited to the funeral. But the fact of the matter is, like, which is all about trying to get, there's a lot going on. Plus there's things kind of working against them. The bridges are, getting destroyed because of, the storm, or at the very least they're heavily damaged. And it's just kind of complicating an already stressful situation, trying to make sure all these communities that be in Alexandria, the Kingdom, Hilltop, Oceanside, all kind of like in the sanctuary, all work together and not have to, like, try to find this perfect balance, this like ecosystem of like helping each other. But so far it doesn't seem like it's necessarily working that well. And obviously, if you've seen a trailer, we kind of are getting a good idea of what kind of goes down that route. But obviously I won't talk about that if you haven't seen a trailer, if you've avoided everything. So, but I'm very interested to see like that continue, like the struggle of trying to do what's best. Cause it's like one of those things of like, if you try to do something for everyone, will you end up with nothing in the end? That's kind of what I'm wondering. Is that what's going to happen with Rick? Because this is this interesting situation that comes up every once in a while where it's like you have no enemies and you're just trying to work on things and things eventually fall apart. Great examples would be like season 4, beginnings of season 4, beginnings of season 6. They had stuff they were working on in season 6 that kind of end up coming back and blowing up in their faces. So I'd probably use season 4 as the best example at the beginning of like, oh yeah, everything kind of works out. No real enemies. Yes, some enemies kind of came back into the fray, in particular the governor, but in general it seems like, yeah, technically you don't have any enemies, like I said, aside from Negan, which is interesting because we didn't even get a look at him at all this episode. Side note, I just remembered, and I it would have been sucky if I didn't bring it up at all, totally new intro, which is crazy to me. Like, obviously the intro's changed a little bit over the years, but it's like, man, after 8 seasons you decided to change the intro. I thought that was kind of interesting because I like the crow aesthetic too. I feel like that was kind of interesting. Like, that's popping up more, like crows being a heavy symbolism in like the intro and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of neat. So I'm, like I said, I'm curious to see kind of how this all goes forward. You have Carol kind of staying behind and kind of running things at the sanctuary. We'll see how that goes. As like I said, as we can see that there's trouble brewing there on that level of like, oh, there's people still loyal to Negan and stuff like that, especially like, is this going to lead to people eventually setting him free? What's going to happen at the Hilltop situation? What's really kind of happening in Oceanside? Like, I mean, is there even really any? Well, no, because like he had talked about sending, was it Eugene and Rosita to Oceanside? So yeah, Oceanside's still a thing. Like, just people just come over there. Oh, interesting enough, just kind of an acting thing. The actor who plays Justin at the Sanctuary, he played Ronan in the 100, but he also played Anton in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is interesting on many different levels, just because it's like, oh, 2 TV shows based on comic books and stuff like that. There's that. Also, the crossover is the actress who plays Piper in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's also in this show as someone from Oceanside. She also played Nunez in season 2 of Outcast. So it's just full circle, because it's like, oh yeah, comic book stuff in general, because it's like, oh, Marvel, Marvel TV show, and you're also in like a Image Comics TV show, which doubles up for the actress who plays Nunez / Piper, because she was also in Outcast, which is also, an Image Comics, because it's Robert Kirkman's one of the people behind it, so I don't know, I just think it's funny full circle how that whole kind of plays out. Because in retrospect, now I'm thinking about Justin when he was like, oh yeah, we don't have any paint, and Daryl's like, figure it out. It's like, yeah, you can definitely tell Daryl's got some animosity when it comes to that place, because it's just kind of like, she was like, oh yeah, let people know. And he's like, I'm not going to go out and have a speech in front of everybody like he would. It's just kind of like, I'm not trying to be Negan. I'm not trying to do anything like Negan. I hate that dude. So obviously, like I said, he's got his own reasons for hating, being at the sanctuary. It is kind of interesting that Rick would choose him to be there out of all the places he hates. But I guess it's because he trusts Daryl, and also because Daryl has done such a good job with it. He knew that Daryl would, so that's why he gave him that position, which I guess in retrospect you could be like, yeah, it's still a little dickish picking that position. I don't know. Like I said, maybe Daryl volunteered. Like I said, we don't know 100% like how everyone like is really thinking and how they really feel. A lot of people, well, Daryl's kind of made it clear how he felt, and so did Maggie. So, like I said, in the general scheme of things, it's very interesting. I'm so excited to see where this season goes, especially because, sadly, once again, I won't talk about it until it eventually happens. But like the big thing that everyone's going into the season, be like, oh, there's that. If you've managed to avoid it, then good on you. And I won't talk about it. And like I said, until it happens, I won't talk about it. So, but I feel like most people who, anyone that might come across this be like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because I feel like most people in general, it was literally all over the trailers. It's literally all over the internet. So I feel like you can't help but have come across it like, maybe not directly, but adjacently. Like it's a whole thing. I won't really, like I said, I'll just kind of leave it at that. So, but nevertheless, like I said, I'm very excited to see where the season takes us. I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us, kind of as things kind of build out over the course of the season. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good